Okay, let's talk about some materials. So, materials. There is we have a great links list directly to where to find these materials on page 205. But I want to just show a couple things. I pulled some things off my drawing desk, and I'll show you some of my favorites and a couple other basics. And then, but really to get rolling in this book, just really a stack of paper or a good sketch pad is nice. A sketch pad with some cheap layout paper or bond paper is a good idea. Even newsprint. This is $2.55. A little newsprint pad, 9 by 12 size or A4 is a good size to start with. That and just a ballpoint pen, I think. And for doing a lot of this industrial design style drawing, we don't do a lot of erasing because it tends to slow us down and you lose a lot of the construction lines. So it's just good practice to start to use tools that don't allow you to erase. It also forces you to think a little bit more before you put the lines on the page. So a couple of my favorites. This is, and again, there's links on our website, Scott Robertson Workshops, and there's that website's listed on page 205. So, but just a few of my favorites. This is the Pilot Hi-Tech C. Use this one quite a bit. A nice steel nib that doesn't wear out, and a nice, very fine, constant black line. These are some of my favorite graphite pencils. I really like the Tombow pencil. It's one of my favorites, so I like those quite a bit. Also, for wax-based pencils, I like the Faber-Castell Polychromos. It's a nice, very nice colored pencil. Good Sharpie is always useful for a nice permanent fine black line. And Copic, of course, multi-liner pen. My favorite ballpoint, which is unfortunately out of production, Jiminy Light by Zebra. But I learned recently that the refill for this pen is actually used in a lot of their pens. So it may not have the same outside casing, but the nib and the ink will be the same. So again, there's a link to that off of the website. And my favorite brush pen is by also Pentel, called the Pocket Brush Pen. And very, very fine point, very, very much like a brush. One of my favorites. Good eraser. There's a kneaded eraser when you're working with graphite. I like to use a bit of gouache occasionally, so I use the Winsor Newton Designer's Gouache, a permanent white and a jet black. For markers, I really like the Copic marker. And the reason I like the Copic marker as my favorite is, one, their values are pretty right on. If you swatch a set of markers like grayscale that goes from 0 to 10, and you pick up like a value 1 or a 2 or a 5 and you swatch it on a piece of paper, their values really are very close to what their numbers say they should be. Whereas if you swatch other marker manufacturers' markers, their grayscale might be very skewed dark or very skewed light with big gaps. And so I like that. So I like first that the values match the numbers quite well. And I also like the variety of nibs. So I like this brush pen nib quite a bit. And then the big blocky one right at the end. So I tend to use the smaller sort of oval one as opposed to the square marker. Like this is the square style. I just think it's a little bit easier to hold, this one. And I get a little more control with the brush pen since it is easier to hold. So those are my favorite markers to use. Okay, moving on. Paper. Well, paper is, you just have to sort of test a lot of things and find your favorites. I just grabbed a couple of sketch pads, went over to the local supply store and picked up a couple things. There's some newsprint, which I'll probably do some demos on during these videos. Some Canson marker paper, some straight up bond paper. Bond is a little bit heavier than regular layout. It's just like a 20-pound paper. So really, but just test it and find what you like with your pens, your pencils, and you're just going to have your favorites personally. The key is to just test things and make a little mental note of the ones that you like. Some Strathmore always makes great paper. Some Seth Cole paper. So you can see there's a huge variety, right? Tracing paper, bond paper, newsprint, recycled newsprint. But the most important thing is also one of my favorites, Borden Riley. Borden and Riley marker paper. I use this quite a bit because it takes markers nicely, but also it allows you to see through. It's translucent enough to do overlays. Newsprint is, what's nice about it is it's really dirt cheap, right? $2.50 for a full pad of 50 sheets. And it feels really great with a ballpoint pen. Although you can't see through it, so you can't do overlays and things easily, but it's kind of a friendly medium because it's just a soft, you get nice line weight. It's a good place to start. Okay, so, the most important thing I was going to say, the paper thing, is to have a pad, right? That's what's important about having this, is to have a thickness here, so that when you put down nice line quality, you don't have the texture of a table underneath. Like a flat sheet of paper on like a Formica surface like this is going to give you, it's going to have a lot of grain and texture to it. But working in a pad of paper, right, with thickness to it, you'll always get better line quality. All right, one good brush. I have had this Winsor Newton Series 7 brush. So I don't do a lot of painting, but I tend to do, cut lines and highlights and things. This has lasted me over a decade. This is, my glasses on, looks like a number 3 round brush. So I think a 3 or 4 is a good all-around brush for doing cut lines and highlights and things like that. Put that guy away. A couple other specialized tools. Nice to have a brush, so a drafting brush to brush off those erasers should you choose to use them. I do erase quite a bit when I'm using graphite, but that's about it. So anyway, that's nice to have. A Weeble pad is nice to dab your pen on it while you're sketching. So good habit, sketch a line, and then off to the side of your sketch pad or sketchbook, right, in this case. So let's just open up this guy. Let's say I had this sketchbook and I was doing these sketches, and right, if I wanted to keep this line quality nice and light, then I would just, as I'm sketching, then just reach over and touch, right? So that's a Weeble pad. Again, there's a link off our website. Here's the one I use all the time, so you can see it's quite worn, and that's why. Just when I'm thinking about the next line, before I sketch it, then just reach over and touch. And that keeps the ballpoint nib clean, and so it doesn't drop ink and ruin your line quality. So those are nice. It doesn't have to be a Weeble pad you can just use a paper towel. It's fine. Or an old rag is good as well. Weeble pads are really the best for chalk work, which is not really going to be covered in this book. The chalk work is going to be in our How to Render book, which is still a work in progress. I like this guy. This is a divider that divides things along the golden section. So golden section is sort of the most naturally occurring proportion in nature, and it's 1 to 1.618. And so if you want to learn more about that, just type in golden proportion into Google, or golden section, things like that. Again, there's a link there. But that's a proportion that it occurs so naturally that if you start to include those proportions in some of your designs, they'll start to feel more natural. So this is handy divider. If you want to make your own, you can also just jump online and find that. Look up golden section divider, and you can just make some out of some cardboard with a couple of pins. This is a equal space divider, and it does what the name says it does, is it just divides a distance into equal spaces. So when you're laying out perspective grids, as you'll see in the book, this is a pretty handy tool to divide a line into equal spaces, and then you can draw out your grid from that. So this one I use off and on, especially when doing more technical line drawings. When you start to do finished line drawings, and you have to start drawing curves through points, having a set of sweeps is also a nice thing. Also commonly called ship's curves or French curves. And those are my sweeps. This is a common set of sweeps that you get, actually all the Art Center students usually get these. These are kind of the mini versions of them. Art Center is, I think, the only place I know of to get them, unfortunately. But this is a classic, ship's curves. If you look up ship's curves, you'll find similar curves to these. These are nice accelerating curves, no constant arcs. But French curves, ship's curves, flexible, curves, those are nice to go back in and finish up your final line work and get a really precise curve in your drawing. Protractor is often handy, especially for dividing circles and things. I also like to use from Alvin, this parallel glider. Parallel glider does what it says. It has two wheels here, those little rubber guys, one axle. And when it's very hard, I'm actually pushing on it. It's hard, if you push down on it, it's very hard to get it to twist because these grippy rubber wheels. So when you push on it lightly, it will draw parallel lines. It only moves right in one direction. So we need to do a lot of parallel lines, maybe hook this up in a one-point perspective, line that up with your horizon, and then you can just easily move up and down, right, to draw lines. You can also easily move, of course, for your verticals, left and right. So that's also a pretty handy tool. One of the other things I really like is lots of likes in this video, because these are my favorite tools that I've used for years now, decades actually. So these are my ellipse guides, and ellipse guides are great. These are from Pickett. I've had these forever, ever since I was in school, which now is a long time ago. So these, I think, what are we at now? He's like 26 years old, these ellipse guides. So they are a little bit expensive, but they really make drawing so much easier when drawing ellipses, and well worth the investment. And if I factored in what they cost me per year over 26 years, they're quite worth it. So they don't wear out if you treat them okay. You can see they're quite, they're dirty, they're stained, they've been through it a little bit, but they still work, still just as precise as the day I bought them. So well worth it to get a set of ellipse guides. This is the small set, and get a full set too, the whole range of degrees. There's some sort of shortened degrees, like 15 to 60 maybe, but get the full. This is a 10 degrees to 80 degrees, because you will use them all. And circles occur so much in the things that you want to draw in nature and architecture and objects that it's just probably the handiest thing. In fact, when I'm sketching in my sketchbook, I tend to, the tools, my mini toolkit is just my sketchbook, which is a Strathmore acid-free paper, probably a Series 300, I believe, hardcover. So my little travel kit for drawing is really just this sketchbook, my ellipse guides, and one ballpoint pen. And so I can do all of my sketching in this book is done. So like these airplanes, which are from the book as well, these are just freehand. And in fact, no ellipse guides there yet. No tools there either. All freehand there. Freehand there. All freehand. So it looks like just a sketchbook and a pen will do it. There's an ellipse guide. One. There's another one. So a couple of ellipse guides, and all the rest just a ballpoint pen. So those are probably the most helpful for me, because I can do all the rest basically freehand. But when it comes to tightening up the ellipses, it's really a great thing to have. And I think that that covers it for the tools and materials. We're going to move next into some basic biomechanics. So let's get started on that. Okay, so you found a pen you like and some paper. And now, first couple of things before we get into the actual drawing and perspective. Some biomechanics. So a great thing to practice, because we're going to be doing a lot of perspective grids, of course, is to practice drawing freehand straight lines. And you want to just practice these and train your arm. And it doesn't matter what direction you draw, right? You can draw towards yourself, you can draw away, you can draw, right, whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you can train your arm to draw one good straight line. And I tend to draw sort of away from my body, and kind of actually on an angle feels the most natural. And I use my shoulder right? You see when I drew that line, I didn't try to do like this, right, and use my wrist or my fingers. So what you want to try and do is one good straight line, and then if I need to make that line in a different orientation, then I just spin the pad of paper around, right, if I wanted that to be the horizon, and then I would just draw that like this, for instance. And if I wanted to do a little perspective grid, I would just keep moving the page around to draw the same line over and over again. And then I can move it further, and I could draw it. When I need to draw on, like, for instance, this vertical line, it's now going to be vertical to the horizon line. I just draw above first, find the right angle, move the pad or my arm, usually the pad. Okay, and I try to draw, oh, missed it. Try to draw that at 90. That's closer. Okay, and then go here to here. So you can see, and then for short lines, you can definitely, use your fingers, but even when I would use my fingers, I sort of use them in a big, mechanical stroke to try and make that line as straight as possible. Okay, so this is one of the first things to master. Now, if I look at drawing this next line from this corner back to this vanishing point, as an example, that's a hard line to draw. Most likely, if I start here, I'm going to hit it, but I'm probably going to miss. So what I do to improve accuracy, spin it upside down, okay, because the pad doesn't care, right? The perspective doesn't care, and then I know I'm going to start from here, and then if I miss it here, no big deal, all right? So let's go like this, and I just sort of draw above it first. See, missed a little bit, but no big deal, still works here. Okay, so that improves a little bit of accuracy. So spin those pads around, train your arm to draw one good straight line. Okay, over and over. Another great thing to practice, put down 2 points. Okay, and then try to connect them, draw above it first. And try to connect those points. Drawing lines that are parallel to each other is good practice. So, all good things to get started, to train a little bit of muscle memory. Now, when you get a new pad of paper, one of the first things to do that will allow you to spin it around a little more easily, okay, is when you open it, some pads have this nice fold and the spine is actually disconnected. Let's see there, the spine's disconnected from the cover, and some don't. But even with this, it's not really enough to make it easy to spin. So what I like to do is fold that cover about, inch and a half or so away. So put a nice fold in there and then use a back of a pen or cap of a pen or something and press it. So it's got a nice hard crease, okay? And now when you want to spin the pad, you can just spin it with your left hand or your right hand, but your offhand. And then what I need to do, so this is going to be happening out of frame over here, spinning, okay? And then in frame, I'll go ahead and draw, right, a straight line. And if I want to change the direction, I just move the pad with my opposite hand. And it becomes very fast, right? And a nice big flat area to hold with your fingers and makes it easy to spin. Okay, another great thing to practice, obviously, we need to draw curved lines. We're going to be doing a lot of that in this book. Kind of like practicing the straight lines, right? Training your body, you want to do the same sort of thing. You want to train your muscles to draw one good curve. Not one, I'm sorry, the curve's going to have to change. But what you want to start to do is be able to draw through points. And so when you draw through points, you sort of look ahead to the next point. Okay, to be able to hit that. Because it's one thing to be able to draw nice, flowing, smooth curves, right, that are freehand, without any points that you're constrained to. But when we start drawing in perspective, we're going to have points in space, and we're going to have curves that have to go through those points. So we might have, for instance, 3 sections, okay, maybe even put a 4th corner of a box here, And we might have to have a curve that connects through all of the corners of those planes. So to draw that curve, of course with this pen it's a little unforgiving because it's straight black, but I'm using it here so that it's easier to see for the demo. But a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go to this one and start to look at this one and look where I have to end at that one. So I sort of start here, but I look here, and when I'm looking at this one, I'm actually looking there, right, to make sure. And a lot of times I draw these with my fingers like this. I mean, it's safe fingers, but it's really like pivoting from here, right? So it's kind of like a smaller arc than what you get using your elbow. And then continue down to that last point. So there's a curve, right, that's hitting each one of those corners. Then we can make it a little bit heavier after the fact. So those are all good things to practice. So a little bit of biomechanics, start to train your muscle memory, and that's where you need to start.